There are two types of barks. One means, something's here. The other means, get out now. On a warm Friday morning near Brookhaven, Officer Rachel Hayes stood at a temporary checkpoint on Route 17, her thumb hooked in her duty belt, watching the slow trickle of cars. It was a routine morning, dust swirling, coffee in hand, and her canine partner Ekko, a German shepherd, sitting alertly by her side. Everything was going smoothly. Drivers were cooperative, and it looked like they'd be wrapping up soon. Then a hearse approached, moving at a crawl. Its black paint shimmered in the sunlight, almost too polished, like a shadow dressed for a formal event. The driver, pale and dressed in a dark suit, gave a polite wave as he neared. That's when Ekko growled. Rachel tensed, glancing down. Ekko's lip curled, a rare sign. He never reacted like this. Not to animals, not to unfamiliar scents, not even to strangers. He was well-trained and precise. But now he stepped forward and let out a single sharp bark. The hearse came to a halt. The driver rolled down his window, nodding calmly. "Afternoon, officer. Just trying to get through before it gets any hotter?" Rachel nodded, approaching with caution. "Where are you headed?" "Holy Cross Cemetery, West Side. Family burial," he replied, his voice catching slightly. "My wife passed last week." His eyes were dry, his tone too smooth. Rachel's instincts prickled. Ekko barked again, this time deeper, pacing along the passenger side, nose pressed to the hearse's door. Rachel signaled for backup to stay put. "May I see your paperwork, sir?" she asked. The man hesitated, then handed over a folder. Death certificate, cremation waiver, and a transport permit from another state. Rachel frowned, scanning the documents. "Is everything all right?" the driver asked, gripping the steering wheel. Ekko's barking grew louder, more urgent. Suddenly he leapt up, paws slamming against the hearse, and let out a howl. Not aggressive, but desperate. If you believe dogs have a sixth sense, wait until you see what Ekko finds next. Subscribe to Animal Heroes for more real canine rescue stories. What happens next will shock you. Rachel stepped back, her voice calm but commanding. "Sir, I need you to step out of the vehicle." "With all due respect, officer." "Now," she interrupted, her tone sharp. The man complied, raising his hands as he exited. Ekko remained by the hearse, tail rigid, ears alert. Rachel opened the rear door. Inside was a pristine cherrywood coffin, silver handles gleaming, a single white rose on top. It should have been peaceful, but the air inside was off. Not the scent of embalming fluid or decay, but something faintly artificial like medical equipment. She looked to Ekko. "Are you sure?" Ekko gave a single quiet bark and sat. That was his confirmation. Rachel called over Officer Morales, her partner, who approached with his radio. "Get the coroner's unit here. We're opening the casket." They did, and for a moment no one spoke. There was no body. Instead, beneath a velvet cloth, they found an oxygen tank, and under that, a small movement, a bare foot, then a muffled cry. Rachel's heart pounded. "Jesus," Morales whispered. Rachel acted fast. "I need trauma shears and a medic now," she called. Inside the casket, wrapped in layers of insulation and dark fabric, was a young girl, maybe 6 or 7. Duct tape covered her mouth, wrists bound with wire ties. She was shaking so hard she could barely breathe. Rachel gently cut the tape, whispering, "You're safe now." "We've got you." The girl looked up, tears streaking her face, and managed a small smile when she saw Ekko. Then she spoke, her voice trembling. "He said if I screamed, I'd stay buried." The driver didn't try to run. He just stood there, hands cuffed, lips pressed tight. Rachel leaned in. "Who are you working with? Where are the others?" The man just smiled. "I'm only the courier." Inside the hearse, officers found forged documents. A disposable phone, extra license plates, and a list. Names, ages, codes that matched missing children from 3 different states. Rachel stood with Ekko as crime scene teams arrived and the ambulance sped away, the rescued girl safe inside. She glanced at her partner, the dog who had saved another life by trusting his instincts. Ekko nudged her hand, and she knelt to scratch behind his ear. "Good job, boy. You did it." But Rachel knew this was just the beginning. If one child had been hidden like this, how many more had already slipped through? How many coffins were still out there, unopened and unnoticed? The highway was quiet again, but no one felt at ease. The ambulance was gone, carrying the girl to County General. Officers packed up cones and evidence bags, the air thick with dust and the heaviness of what they'd uncovered. Rachel stood by her cruiser, arms folded, staring at the abandoned hearse. Its once shiny paint now looked dull and oily in the afternoon sun. Ekko sat at her feet, ears twitching at every sound, his ID tag jingling softly in the breeze. She couldn't shake the memory of the girl's cry when they lifted her from the casket. It wasn't a scream, more a broken whimper, as if hope was something her body had forgotten. Officer Morales approached, clipboard in hand. Coroner says the casket was custom-built. False bottom, oxygen line, battery-powered ventilation. This was no last-minute job. Rachel nodded, jaw clenched. No amateur did this. Someone planned it. Yeah, and the driver lawyered up before we even got to the station, Morales said. Doesn't seem scared either, like he's done this before. Ekko let out a low, uneasy growl. Rachel looked down. You sense it too, huh? The dog's gaze stayed fixed on the hearse, nose twitching. News crews were already setting up nearby, reporters waving at cameras, eager for the story. Rachel turned away. She hated the chaos, the flashing lights, the spectacle. Ekko nudged her leg. She crouched to check his harness, brushing off dust. His tail flicked, ready for more. What she didn't say was that she wasn't sure she was. It had been a long year, too many tragedies, too many nights without sleep. Her ex-husband used to say, "You bring ghosts home, Rachel. That's why you never rest." Maybe he was right. But Ekko made it bearable. He was the one partner who never lied, never hesitated, never left her side. Now he'd found a living child in a coffin. That wasn't luck. That was a warning. The next morning, the station buzzed with tension. A federal team was on the way, the kind with windbreakers and big yellow letters. Rachel sat in the briefing room, sipping burnt coffee and reviewing her report. The suspect's name was Wendell Crow, 54, a licensed mortuary driver from New Mexico. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. But the hearse was registered to a funeral home that had burned down 2 years ago. Where's he being held? Rachel asked. County jail? Morales replied. Says he was hired through a temp agency. Claims he didn't know what was in the casket. Rachel leaned back. Sure. FBI says they'll take over soon. Until then, it's our problem. She glanced out the window. Ekko was outside, pacing the fence, nose in the air as if reading invisible messages. He's not finished, she murmured. A couple of hours later, Rachel loaded Ekko into her SUV and drove to the impound lot. The hearse sat behind yellow tape, silent and still. She pulled on gloves and opened the rear doors. The casket was gone, but the strange metallic scent lingered. Ekko jumped down, circling the vehicle, tail stiff. He stopped at the back bumper and started scratching. What is it, Ekko? The dog barked once. Rachel knelt, running her hand along the seam where the carpet met the frame. There, hidden under the trim, was a small compartment. Inside, 3 prepaid cell phones, 2 USB drives, and a set of keys labeled with the number 14. Rachel's heart raced. Good boy, she called Morales. I think I found something. That night, sleep wouldn't come. The number 14 echoed in her mind. She sat at her kitchen table, paperwork scattered, cold pizza untouched. Ekko lay nearby, watching her with quiet concern. The USB drives held invoices and encrypted spreadsheets, rows of fake death certificates, each matching a missing child. The list stopped at 12 entries, but the last file was named coffin14.pdf. Rachel stared at it, her stomach twisting. Ekko lifted his head and whined softly. Yeah, she said, rubbing his fur. I think there's another one. By sunrise, Rachel was back behind the wheel. Using the key tag, she tracked it to a self-storage facility about 30 miles outside town. It was the kind of cheap, out-of-the-way place where no one asked questions. She waited for backup before approaching. The lot manager's hand shook as he checked their badges. Unit 14? Yeah, the guy paid 6 months up front. Said it was antiques. Rachel unlocked the padlock and rolled up the door. The smell hit her immediately. Not decay, but chemicals, disinfectant, and rubber. Ekko surged forward, barking once before freezing, muscles tense, nose working overtime. Easy, boy, she murmured. We've got this. Inside, another casket stood against the wall, identical to the first. Same silk lining, same polished wood. Rachel's voice was steady. Get forensics. No one touches anything. She crouched beside the coffin, heart pounding. The latch wasn't locked, just closed, as if someone planned to return soon. When she lifted the lid, icy air spilled out. The casket was empty, except for a folded note taped to the inside. The handwriting was childish. You're getting closer. Morales cursed under his breath. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "He's watching us." They cleared the area and dusted for prints but found nothing. Whoever had been there knew how to disappear without a trace. That night, Rachel filed her report, but the note haunted her. "You're getting closer." Closer to what? Ekko lay at her feet, eyes open in the dark. 3 days later, the FBI took Crow into federal custody. During transport, he said only one thing: "Tell the lady with the dog, check the funeral route map." Rachel went straight to evidence and pulled the route sheet from the glove box. The GPS had logged 5 previous trips, funeral deliveries that never reached any cemetery. 5 towns, 5 missing children, each one gone during a funeral service. Ekko paced beside the map spread on her cruiser's hood, nose darting between the pins. He stopped at the 4th one, a place called Ridgel. Rachel followed his gaze. "That's where we start." They arrived at sunset. Ridgel was a dusty farming town, unchanged for decades. 1 diner, 1 gas station, and a small forgotten funeral chapel. The chapel door creaked as they entered. The air was thick with the scent of wax and old wood. Ekko moved ahead, sniffing pews, corners, and the heavy curtains at the back. Then he froze, a low growl rumbling in his chest, a warning. Rachel felt it before she saw it. She swept her flashlight across the floor. A section of the boards looked newer, less worn. "Help me with this," she said. Morales pried the planks loose, revealing a concrete hatch beneath. They lifted it, and a rush of stale air hit them. Ekko barked and lunged forward. Inside the hidden crawl space was a coffin-sized refrigeration unit, complete with cables, ducts, and tubing. Rachel's flashlight shook in her hand. Oh my God. When they opened it, there was no child, no body, just a small teddy bear, its ear torn, fur damp, and a tag tucked under its paw. The same handwriting, not fast enough. Rachel's knees nearly buckled. Morales turned away, muttering a curse. Ekko whimpered, pressing close to Rachel's leg. She steadied herself, taking a slow breath. "He's still moving them," she said quietly. "He's using these places as holding points before the next step." "Transport to where?" Morales asked. Rachel glanced at the open casket, then at Ekko. The dog's nose pointed toward the wall, specifically at a vent. She shined her flashlight inside and caught a glint of metal. Carefully, she reached in and pulled out a small tag. It read, "Property of Sunil Funeral Services, Phoenix, Arizona," the same company that had burned down 2 years ago. Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. "They're still operating." Ekko looked up at her, eyes wide and alert, as if he understood. Rachel stood, squaring her shoulders, her hand resting on the dog's collar. "We're not finished," she said. "Not until we find every last one." The Phoenix sun was relentless, even in late October. Heat shimmered off the pavement as Rachel stepped out of her SUV and stared at what remained of Sunil Funeral Services. The building was a blackened shell, charred beams, shattered windows, the whole place hollowed out by fire. But something about the scene felt wrong. Too much left behind, too many loose ends. Ekko jumped out beside her, sniffing the dry wind, ears flicking. He didn't bark. He just stared at the ruins, unmoving. Morales pulled up behind her, stepping out with a sweating bottle of water in hand. "Place went up 2 years ago," he said, nodding at the building. "Electrical fire, supposedly. Case was closed before the ashes cooled." Rachel narrowed her eyes. "Too convenient," Morales agreed with a mutter. They stepped past the faded, closed by order of the state tape and into what was left of the funeral home. Faded wallpaper, scorched upholstery, half-melted chandeliers drooping from the ceiling. But what caught Rachel's attention was what had survived the fire. The mortuary refrigerators. One of them was still running. Ekko moved first, nose low to the scorched tiles. He circled the refrigeration unit, tail stiff, breathing quick. "Tell me that's not plugged in," Morales whispered. Rachel stepped closer. The handle was blackened, but the steel door was cold to the touch. She pulled on a latex glove and reached out. The latch clicked, and a hiss of cold air escaped. Inside wasn't a body, but another casket, smaller than the roadside one, sleeker, wrapped in insulated film and labeled in faded marker, C10. Rachel's stomach twisted. "This isn't storage," she said. "It's inventory." Morales stepped back. "Think there's someone in it?" "Only one way to find out." Rachel took out her multi-tool, broke the industrial seal, and slowly lifted the lid. The air inside was frigid, her breath turning to mist. Ekko growled, low and uneasy. But there was no child inside. Instead, there were children's clothes, tiny jeans, a pink jacket, a single light-up sneaker with dead batteries, all carefully folded around a single item. A doll, its porcelain face cracked, one eye missing. Morales exhaled sharply. "What the hell are they doing?" Rachel didn't answer. She couldn't. Her hand brushed the bottom of the casket and found something slick. A photograph, edges burned but the image still visible. A little girl smiling, holding the same doll. On the back, a name, Melissa T., age 6. Last seen Tucson. Rachel didn't realize she was holding her breath until Ekko nudged her leg again. "We're not dealing with funerals anymore," she said. "This is trafficking, and these are their cold lockers." A full forensics team was called in, FBI, State Crime Lab, even Homeland Security. By sundown, the Senil site was officially a federal crime scene. By midnight, they'd pulled 6 more units from the refrigeration bay, each marked with a number, each filled with belongings, not bodies, souvenirs. By morning, they had a list of 8 names, all matched to missing children from across the Southwest. Most had been thought to be runaways, some were custody disputes. All had vanished without a trace, until now, and every clue led back to this place. Rachel sat on the back bumper of the transport van, clipboard in hand, scanning the evidence tags. She didn't cry, never did at scenes like this, but her grip on the pen was tight enough to turn her knuckles white. Ekko rested his head on her thigh, silent and still. "You're the reason we found them," she whispered, voice barely audible. "All of them." Ekko blinked, no tail wag, as if he understood the gravity of what they'd uncovered. Morales approached, handing her a new folder. Feds traced Crow's keyring. "You'll want to see this?" Rachel flipped through the documents, rental agreements, leases, all under shell companies. One name jumped out, Eden Memorial Transport Services. "They're using new names," she said. "Yeah, and they're still moving caskets. Last GPS ping was 3 days ago." He pointed to a map. Old Desert Road near the Colorado border. Abandoned mining town. Calico Wells. Rachel glanced at Ekko, who was already on his feet. The drive to Calico Wells took 4 hours. The last stretch, nothing but cracked asphalt and silence. The ghost town was a relic of the mining boom. 6 buildings slumped against the hills. An old church, a saloon, a post office buried in sand. Wind whistled through broken windows. But what caught Rachel's attention was a small shack beside the station house. Fresh tire tracks in the dirt. Ekko barked once, tail rigid. Rachel parked behind a pile of rusted metal and crouched, binoculars in hand. Someone moved inside, a shadow passing the window. Morales joined her. "Looks like they're using the old loading dock." "No power lines," Rachel noted. "They're running on a generator." "That means cold storage," she nodded. "Let's move." Guns drawn, they breached the door. The shack was colder than it should have been, a low hum coming from the back. Ekko pulled Rachel straight to a reinforced steel hatch. She opened it. Inside, rows of vertical compartments lined the wall, 5 in total. 3 were empty, 2 remained sealed. She unlocked the first. Inside was a coffin wrapped in plastic and surrounded by ice packs. She tore through the layers. A boy curled up alive, eyes wide. They pulled him out quickly. He was sedated but breathing. "Call it in," Rachel shouted. "We need a medevac now," Ekko barked again, leading her to the second locker. Another child, a girl, pale and still. Rachel reached for her wrist and felt a faint pulse. She cradled the girl, whispering, "You're safe now." "You're safe?" By nightfall, both children were in the pediatric ICU at St. Luke's under constant watch. Doctors said they'd been kept in controlled hypothermia, a method to preserve organ function during transport. Rachel stood outside the glass, hands in her pockets, eyes on the girl who hadn't woken up yet. Morales joined her quietly. "They think she's from El Paso," he said. "Disappeared 2 weeks ago. Last seen leaving school." "She would have died in another 12 hours, Rachel whispered. "If Ekko hadn't—" She couldn't finish. Morales nodded. "They're testing logistics, moving kids like organs, hidden in the only cargo that never gets checked." Rachel looked at the girl, silent, making a promise to herself. They would find the rest. They would tear this operation apart. That night, Ekko curled at her feet in the motel room, twitching in his sleep as if still on the trail. Rachel sat at the table, files spread out, red circles on the map. each one a name, a child. One file had no last name, just a first. Zara, age 5, reported missing from her aunt's funeral. The same day Crow's crossed state lines, Rachel closed her notebook and reached down to scratch Ekko's ears. He stirred, blinking up at her, waiting. "We go again at first light, partner?" The girl's name was Zara, age 5. She woke up whispering. Not for a doctor, not for a nurse, not even for Rachel. She called for the dog. Ekko lay just outside her ICU room, body still, ears forward, standing silent guard over a place no child should ever have seen. When Zara opened her eyes that morning, she didn't ask for her parents. She didn't cry or scream. She just whispered one word, over and over, "Doggy." Rachel had to turn away when she heard it. By mid-morning, doctors cleared Zara for a short, supervised interview. She sat bundled in a hoodie far too big, legs swinging over the edge of the hospital bed, clutching a stuffed rabbit someone from the station had brought. The tag still dangled from its ear. Rachel crouched beside her, voice gentle. "Hey, sweetheart, do you remember your name?" The girl nodded slowly. "Zara, that's a beautiful name." "My name's Rachel," she said gently. "I work with the police," Zara pointed through the glass. "Doggy works too." Rachel smiled.
"He sure does."
"That's Ekko. He helped us find you." Zara's voice was barely above a whisper. "He smelled me." "That's right. He did." Zara leaned in, her words secretive. "He's the only one who found me." The others didn't listen. Rachel blinked, her heart tightening. "What others?" The little girl's eyes flicked to the corner of the room. "The men with boxes. The ones with no names." She hugged the rabbit closer. "They told me to be quiet. Said if I stayed still in the dark, I'd go to heaven with my auntie." Rachel felt a chill run through her. Zara looked up, her eyes far too old for her small face. "But I didn't go to heaven. I went in the cold box." Later that day, Rachel and Morales sat in the conference room with 2 child services workers and an FBI liaison. Zara's recorded statement played on repeat. The room was silent, everyone listening to the same haunting details. The part that struck hardest came when Zara described the red door. "They put me in a shiny box like a bed. It was cold, real cold. I couldn't move, but I saw the red door close. Then there was no more light." Morales shook his head. "We've checked every storage yard, mortuary, and rail depot. We're running out of places." The FBI agent, Conway, leaned forward. "We might have a lead. There's an old facility in New Mexico. Rail access, private property, sold 6 months ago to a shell company tied to Sunville's former logistics manager. And guess what color the service door is?" Rachel stared at her. "Red," Conway said. "Faded, but you can see it on satellite." Ekko growled softly from under the table. Rachel stood. "We leave in 20. The drive to Royal Wells took hours." Rachel drove, Morales navigated, and Ekko slept between the seats, paws twitching in uneasy dreams. Rachel kept one hand on the wheel, the other resting on Ekko's back. The scenery shifted from desert to cracked earth, scattered brush, and sun-bleached fence posts stretching into nowhere. When they arrived, the place looked deserted. Just an old train yard, a warehouse with rusted siding and a sagging roof, tracks half buried in dust. But the red door was real, chipped, faded, stained at the edges. Morales checked his weapon. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Rachel nodded. "We don't wait." Ekko jumped out as soon as the door opened. Inside, it was pitch black. No lights, no windows, just the low hum of machinery behind metal walls. The air was tinged with a familiar scent. Disinfectant, steel, and freon. Ekko's claws clicked on the concrete as he moved ahead, nose to the ground. He stopped at a hallway, hackles raised. Rachel swept her flashlight down the corridor. Doors lined both sides, each marked with a number. She opened the first door, empty, just shelves and bins, cleaning supplies. The second room was colder, the hum of refrigeration louder. Large containers filled the space, shaped like coffins, steel-framed with cooling vents. Rachel counted 6. Only 3 were still sealed. She stepped closer, heart pounding. Ekko whined. Rachel broke the first seal. Inside was a child, alive, breathing, eyes closed in sedation. Morales whispered, "Oh my God." Rachel moved quickly. "Call EMS, this one's still alive." The second container held another child, a boy. Same condition, alive but drugged. The third container was empty, except for velvet lining and a note typed, "Not handwritten, you're late." They swept the rest of the warehouse. In a side office, they uncovered blueprints, logistics maps, and delivery routes that matched the dates of known abductions. There were racks of children's clothing, cold storage units marked with serial numbers, and unmistakable auction lot tags. Rachel felt her breath catch. This wasn't just about smuggling. It was a system. Sales, shipments, destinations. The children weren't being hidden. They were being sent somewhere. Back at the hospital, Zara watched cartoons with the sound off. When Rachel returned, the little girl reached for her hand as if they'd always known each other. "Did you find the others?" Rachel knelt beside her, gently tucking Zara's hair behind her ear. "Yes, 2 more. Because of you." Zara didn't smile. Instead, she asked, "Did they find the man with the silver tooth?" Rachel froze. Zara went on, "He gave us juice. He always played music like little bells. He said we'd go somewhere better, but he lied. Silvertooth." Rachel's heart pounded. "He said I was special, that someone paid extra. Then he called another man and said, C-14 confirmed." Rachel's stomach dropped. They'd found coffins labeled 10 through 13. Now C-14 was confirmed, but C-15 was still missing. That night, Rachel sat in her motel room, Ekko asleep at her feet, the photo of the red door in her hands. She zoomed in on the warehouse wall just beneath a streak of rust, graffiti, spray-painted numbers, Fionsat, 16 to 17. 10 minutes later, Morales called. His voice was tense. "I think I found the next stop. Security camera at a gas station near Yuma picked up a hearse last night. Crow's old route. Plates bent, but it matches the make and model from 2 other cases. Timestamp, 2:17 a.m. Rachel stared at the photo. Where was it headed? South? She looked at Ekko, who was already awake. They weren't finished. Somewhere out there, another child was waiting in velvet-lined silence, hoping someone would find them before the cold became permanent. The desert outside Yuma was unforgiving. By sunrise, the heat was already pressing through the windshield. When they pulled into the diner parking lot, Rachel's shirt clung to her back, and Ekko's panting filled the cruiser. Morales was waiting outside, sipping burnt coffee. He nodded toward the truck stop across the street. That's where they spotted it. Same black hearse, same model. Plates half torn off. Cameras caught it for just 8 seconds. Long enough for Ekko to get a scent? Rachel asked. Morales handed her a printed still. Blurry, but the outline was clear. The same bent headlight, the same faded chrome grille. Already loaded into Ekko's scent file. Search teams are combing the next town south, but he hesitated. There's something else. Rachel looked up. Morales handed her a manila folder. FBI finally cracked the financials from that USB drive you found in the hidden compartment. She flipped it open. Dozens of transactions, cryptic codes, all routed through shell accounts. But it wasn't the numbers that caught her attention, it was the names. One in particular, Dr. Samuel Kessler. Rachel's eyes narrowed. Isn't he? Former pediatric anesthesiologist, Morales said. Lost his license 3 years ago after 2 kids died under his care at a private clinic in Nevada. No charges ever stuck. The clinic paid out, and then he vanished. Rachel's pulse quickened. He's listed as a consultant for Eden Memorial Transport Services. 2 hours later, they were back on the road. Ekko rode in the back seat, unusually quiet, his gaze fixed on the passing landscape, nose twitching at every turn, as if searching for something just out of reach. They followed the last ping from Kessler's burner phone, 25 miles outside San Luis, down a dirt track barely wide enough for a single vehicle. At the end of the road sat a trailer, not the kind for camping, but the type used for mobile medical units. No windows, a single door, and the low hum of a generator out back. Rachel stepped out, boots crunching in the dust. Ekko jumped down and froze, a deep growl rumbling from his chest, the sound he made when danger was close. Rachel's heart dropped. He's here. They breached the trailer at 1:42 p.m. Inside, the air was cold and sterile, almost too clean. A surgical chair was bolted to the floor, bright lights overhead, empty IV bags hanging, and a drawer labeled sedation kit. No sign of Kessler, but the walls were covered in Polaroids, children's faces, each photo marked with a number, C1 through C17. Rachel's breath caught. Zara was 14, she whispered. These are all real. They checked the fridge in the back. Dozens of vials, each labeled with initials and dates. Blood samples, DNA, maybe even organ tests. Morales nearly dropped the tray. "This isn't just trafficking," he said quietly. "It's profiling." Rachel couldn't speak. Her eyes locked on a photo pinned above the desk. A boy, maybe 8, red hair and freckles, pale skin, labeled C18, premium confirmed match. Delivery pending, a route was scrawled beneath in black marker, NCRT T4, Jacob's Chapel final hold. "What's Jacob's Chapel?" Morales asked. Rachel didn't hesitate. "It's an old church decommissioned, about an hour north of Holbrook. Used to be a halfway house before it shut down. Who owns it now?" "No one. It was auctioned off. We cleared squatters out last year." "No power, no plumbing?" "The perfect place to disappear," Ekko barked, sharp and urgent, standing at the door, nose pointed north. They reached Jacob's Chapel just after dark. The building loomed like a mausoleum. Stone walls, no lights, a crooked cross hanging over the entrance. They cut the engine and sat in the silence. No birds, no wind. Ekko stared through the windshield, unmoving. Rachel checked her weapon. "We're going in." The door wasn't locked. Inside, the air reeked of mildew and bleach. The chapel had been gutted. No pews, the altar stripped bare. On the far side, a stairwell led down. A padlock hung open on the handle. Rachel opened it, flashlight in hand, Ekko close behind. The stairs led to a large basement room, metal tables, plastic curtains, and 3 coffin units, each marked C15, C16, C17. Morales swore under his breath. Rachel moved quickly, opening the first unit. Ekko growled, ears flat. Inside was a boy, breathing, barely conscious. The second held a girl, her eyes fluttering open, pupils wide and unfocused. The third was empty, just velvet lining and a phone buzzing. One message flashed on the screen. "Did you think you'd catch me?" Then the screen went black. No signal, no trace, just silence. Rachel stared at the phone, then at the photo of the missing boy. His face still burned into her memory. The red-haired boy, C18, was gone. They'd come close, but not close enough. Back at the station, the investigation tightened like a noose. Every photo, every child, every location, every coffin traced a path. Rachel mapped the connections on the wall, red thread linking pins across states. Ekko sat beside her, gaze fixed on the last unconnected point. A warehouse in Texas. A new lead had surfaced, another license, another shell company. But one line on the final printout caught Rachel's eye. A delivery manifest, barely legible in the corner. Final stop, McConnell Rail Yard, Sector 9. Receiver code, Vox. Rachel looked at Morales. "Is that a person?" He shook his head. "It's a code. I ran it through the DEA and FBI databases." He handed her a decrypted file. "It's not a name. It's an alias for a private medical courier, veterinary organ exchange. But it's a front. The address is a decommissioned military warehouse, supposedly used for animal transport." Rachel's stomach twisted. "Ready to move again?" Ekko stood, silent and alert, as if he already knew. This time the hunt would end where it began, in the cold, in the dark, in a coffin. The boy's name was Noah. 8 years old, pale and thin, red hair matted to his forehead like old paintbrush bristles. When they found him in C15, his body temperature was dangerously low, but he survived. For the first 12 hours after his rescue, he didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't even flinch, just stared at the ceiling, lost somewhere far colder. Now, Rachel sat across from him in a sunlit recovery room at St. Luke's. The curtains were decorated with cartoon animals, a dry erase board spelled out his name in blue marker, and a balloon bobbed from the IV pole. But nothing could make the room feel normal. Noah was silent, drawing with a dull red crayon, one slow line at a time. He was on his 3rd page. Ekko lay quietly beside the bed, chin on his paws, eyes never leaving the boy. The first drawing was a box, no windows, no doors, just a single red handle. The second was a truck. Now he was sketching a building. Low roof, rows of rectangles like bricks. Rachel leaned in gently. "Can you tell me what you're drawing, Noah?" He didn't look up, just whispered, "The sleeping house." "The sleeping house?" He nodded. "That's what the man with the tooth called it." "The one with the music on his phone?" Rachel swallowed. "What kind of music?" "The kind that makes you float. Like ice cream music, but sad." A chill crept through Rachel's chest. Noah glanced at Ekko. He didn't like the dog sounds. Rachel tried to keep her voice steady. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "The man. He got mad when the dog barked." "What dog?" Noah finally met her eyes. "The one I dreamed about." Later, Rachel met Morales in the parking garage, holding Noah's final drawing. She slid it across the hood of the cruiser. Morales studied it. "That's a depot." Rachel nodded. "It looks like rail cargo. See this line?" She pointed to a faint squiggle at the bottom. "That's not a river. It's a siding track." He even marked vents on the roof. Morales folded his arms. "Kids don't just make this stuff up. No, they remember it." Rachel flipped the drawing over. On the back, Noah had written one word in crooked capitals. Vox, the same as the delivery manifest, the same as the courier company. "He saw it?" Rachel said. "From inside the box." Morales squinted. "What's the dark square in the middle?" "I asked him that too," Rachel replied. "He called it the Black Room, said that's where they took kids who couldn't sleep." Morales cursed softly. Ekko barked once from the back seat. Rachel turned, eyes narrowing. "I think he just confirmed it." The McConnell rail yard had once served military transport during the Cold War. Now, it was privately leased, mostly for scrap and second-hand cargo. Half the building stood empty, shadows stretching across the cracked concrete. The other half of the yard had been converted for industrial storage, vague enough to mean almost anything. The warehouse marked Sector 9 sat at the far edge, unmarked, windowless, with only a loading dock and 2 freight doors. They arrived just after midnight, 2 unmarked vehicles and an FBI van rolling in with Ekko. Rachel approached the perimeter fence with Morales and Agent Conway, now permanently assigned to the task force after the last raid. "This time," Conway said, checking her weapon, "we do it by the book. No mistakes." Rachel glanced at Ekko, who sat motionless at the fence. Suddenly his head lifted. He sniffed the air, then let out a low, controlled growl. Rachel's heart pounded. "He smells someone." They breached the dock doors at 12:41 a.m. Inside, it was darker than expected. No overhead lights, just the occasional flicker of a motion sensor lamp. Ekko moved ahead, weaving between crates. The air was cold, the hum of industrial refrigeration units filling the silence. Then Ekko barked. Sharp. Urgent. Rachel moved, flashlight and sidearm ready. Ekko stopped in front of a steel hatch with a keypad, its display glowing red. Conway stepped up. "Blow it?" Rachel shook her head. "Let me try something." She pulled out the USB drive they'd recovered from the mobile surgical trailer. It had held blueprints and route schedules, but also a file labeled Access Override Vox. She plugged it into the portable interface. The keypad blinked, then clicked. The door unlocked. Inside was not a freezer, but something else. A black room, just like Noah had drawn. The walls were lined with soundproof foam, monitors, and audio equipment. In the center stood a surgical chair, restraint straps dangling, empty syringes scattered nearby. A laptop was still running, its screen showing security feeds from multiple locations. The burned funeral home, the Arizona shack, Jacob's chapel, even the hospital recovery room. Noah's room. "They've been watching us," Morales whispered. Rachel scanned the shelf above the desk. Binders, photos, tapes. She opened the first binder. Photos of children, medical reports, notes, sedation level inconsistent. Subject resisted transport. Transfer postponed until further behavioral evaluation. This wasn't just trafficking. It was a conditioning program. Suddenly, Ekko let out a high-pitched whine and pawed at the far wall. Rachel turned. A thin grate was screwed into the cement, barely visible. An air vent too small for an adult. But maybe not for a child. Ekko sniffed once, then looked up at her. Rachel crouched, unscrewed the cover, and shined her flashlight inside. At the very end of the vent, she saw a small foot, motionless. They tore open the drywall within minutes. Behind it, wrapped in emergency blankets and half buried in insulation, was a girl. 6 years old, alive, eyes closed, breathing shallowly. Paramedics rushed in as Conway called for a full extraction team. Rachel stood back, watching as the girl was carried out, wrapped in warmth, surrounded by light. One more soul pulled from the cold. They found 4 more children that night, each hidden in separate compartments built into false crate panels, labeled as industrial cooling systems. All sedated, all alive, all matched to missing child reports from 5 different states. But there was no sign of Kessler, no sign of the man with the silver tooth, only a final message left on the warehouse server, hidden in a file called 14End. You broke the system, but you'll never touch the architect." Rachel stared at the words, then pulled the USB drive from the console. She didn't care about the architect, not yet. What mattered now was saving whoever was still out there. Back in her motel room, Rachel finally let herself sit down. She kicked off her boots, ran a hand through her hair, and let the silence settle around her. Ekko curled up at her feet. The TV in the corner played old reruns with the sound off, but Rachel's mind was elsewhere. On Noah's drawing, the little rectangles, the vents, and the word Vox. It wasn't just a code or a name. It was a symbol, something bigger. She stared at the pinboard above her bed, each location and each child marked in red. But there were still too many empty spaces. She scratched Ekko behind the ear. "You know what we have to do now, don't you?" Ekko lifted his head, meeting her gaze. No bark, just a steady, waiting look. Rachel stood, picked up her badge, and whispered, "Let's go find the architect." 3 weeks passed. 3 long, exhausting weeks. Rachel barely slept, catching only brief haunted naps between briefings, warrants, interviews, and the occasional shower at the station or a roadside sink. She was chasing shadows, but Ekko never seemed to tire. Every morning, while the team debriefed over coffee and stale donuts, Ekko would pace near the exit, tail stiff, eyes sharp, always waiting for the next clue, the next lost voice. And then, finally, it came. A package, no return address, no fingerprints, dropped off at the precinct front desk in a battered manila envelope, sealed with medical tape. Rachel was eating cold chili from a paper cup when the desk sergeant brought it over. "You've got mail. No postage. Dropped off by hand. Figured you'd want to see it." Rachel opened the envelope and froze. Inside was a black and white photo, grainy, showing the inside of a warehouse. Rows of refrigerated containers, and in the center a single crate marked Ekko. Behind it, half hidden in the shadows, stood a man in scrubs, the glint of a silver tooth just visible in the light. Rachel's pulse spiked. Get Morales and Conway. Now. The team mobilized in under half an hour. They traced the photo's metadata to a known staging site outside Las Cruces, New Mexico, an abandoned medical transport hub left to decay in the desert since 1994. The feds had checked it months ago and found nothing. Now they had a reason to go back. This time, they had Ekko, and Ekko had a name. They arrived just after sunset. The compound sat low against the horizon, flat roofs and sun-warped metal glowing orange in the last light. No electricity, no movement. But before the car even stopped, Ekko barked, a sharp, certain sound. Rachel's heart hammered. She looked at Morales. He's here. Inside, the warehouse felt colder than it should, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. The silence pressed in, thick and heavy. The team split into 2 groups. Rachel and Ekko took the northeast wing. She didn't need to say a word. Ekko was already tracking, nose to the ground, body low, every movement precise. They moved through corridors of forgotten equipment, rusted gurneys, plastic sheeting, shelves of expired medical supplies. Then Ekko stopped, frozen in place, ears forward, head tilted. He stared at a large white door. No lock, no sign. Rachel's flashlight swept over the steel, and she saw it, carved into the paint with something sharp. Vox. Inside was a chamber, dark and cold, walls lined with padded insulation. In the center stood a single container, smaller than the rest, labeled Ekko. Rachel approached slowly. Ekko didn't move, didn't bark, just watched. She popped the latch. Inside the container, there was no child, no body, just an old cassette recorder, already playing. "Congratulations, Officer Hayes. You've found my final act. But you're too late. Do you understand yet? This isn't about cruelty. It's about selection, preservation, a better world for the worthy. And your dog, your precious Ekko, he's the only one who ever kept up. He deserves better than this world, better than silence." Then a faint whimper from behind the wall. Ekko barked sharply, then again. Rachel spun around. "Morales, get the entry team. We've got movement!" Ekko lunged at the back panel, clawing furiously. Rachel followed, flashlight searching for a latch. There, behind a loose panel, she pried it off, revealing a crawlspace. Inside, a boy, alive, gagged, wrists zip-tied, but eyes wide and aware. They pulled him out gently. His wrist was stamped, C-18, the missing red-haired boy. Ekko licked the boy's face. tail wagging for the first time in weeks. Rachel whispered, "We've got you, kid. You're safe now." But the relief was short-lived. Back at the command post, the boy revealed one more truth. There were more, he said quietly. They had trucks. The man with the shiny tooth said it was the last shipment. He said they were going to the farm, the one with the windmill. Rachel leaned in. "What farm?" With trembling hands, the boy drew a crooked house on a hill, a tall windmill, and a red barn. He pointed to the barn. They were in there. He added a dot beside the barn and a doghouse with a chain. The dog barked all night. The next morning they flew over the county by helicopter. There it was, just as the boy had drawn. A remote farm near the Arizona-New Mexico border. Privately owned, no business registration, no livestock. One windmill, one barn, one old shed. Except for fresh tire tracks leading to the back. Rachel and Ekko went in first. The place was empty but not silent. In the barn, beneath a pile of straw, they found a trapdoor. Inside 7 children, cold, weak, but alive. Every one of them matched to the files recovered weeks before. Ekko stayed with them as they were rescued, letting small hands cling to his fur. One girl whispered, "I heard your bark in my dreams." The takedown wasn't dramatic. The man with the silver tooth was arrested in El Paso 2 days later, trying to board a private plane under a false name. He didn't run or resist. He just smiled as they cuffed him, as if he knew his legacy would outlast any prison. He never gave up the names of the buyers, never said how many more had been selected. He only asked one question. "How's the dog?" Rachel never answered. She didn't have to. Ekko had already done what no one else could. He turned silence into sound and cold into hope. 2 months later, Rachel stood on stage at a canine commendation ceremony outside the state capitol. Ekko sat at her side, wearing his medal like it had always belonged to him. Because it did. 14 lives saved, an international trafficking ring exposed, a system broken, and none of it would have happened without a German shepherd who refused to give up. As Rachel looked out at the crowd, at the faces of the children who survived, she felt something shift. Not closure, not yet, but hope, real hope, the kind that echoes. Thank you for following this journey. Ekko's story is a fictional tribute to the real working dogs and handlers who risk everything to save lives and uncover hidden truths. Now it's your turn. Do you believe dogs can sense things we can't? And if so, what do you think Ekko would have found if he kept going?